All right, everybody, welcome back to Marked by Wrestling, and it's time for another episode of Mount Rushmore Matches. Really excited about this one. This is actually kind of a part one of two. We are making our way through the career of one of my favorite wrestlers of all time, and a beloved wrestler from a certain generation, a lot of fans for sure. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Steamboat had multiple stretches in wrestling. Starting off, I want to say maybe even as far back as the '70s, but like all the way to the mid '90s. Then made a brief return after 15 years, just for sort of a cameo match. But we're going to be focusing on the NWA/WCW side of Steamboat's career in this episode, and Lord willing, in the next episode, we'll take a look at his WWF WWE tenure as well. As always, Big Brother Dave is here in the house, and we're gonna be traveling through this Mid-Atlantic NWA WCW tenure. And as I'm even talking right now, I'm already thinking of matches that we're not going to be talking about. And he had honestly such a high quality resume of feuds, especially on the NWA WCW side. I would say it's probably more weighted on that side than WWE. He was always kind of taking a backseat to Hulk Hogan, which is not something we'll avoid in this episode either. I have something to say about that before we're all done as well, but it even happened in WCW. So nevertheless, Steamboat got us his start long before I came along as a wrestling fan. But I want to turn it over to my brother because our first this episode is going to be a little more special, a little more Nikita than Steiner's in terms of our previous ones, where we might be putting you on to actual feuds that he had with other talent, other wrestlers. As opposed to just one very specific match. Because when Steamboat got locked into a program with somebody, one, given the time period, you weren't going to have just one match and let that be done with it. And also, every match was a high quality match. And sometimes the best ones are lost media, like they're lost to time. Even Ric Flair would say so himself, that he called Steamboat one of his greatest opponents, and you probably never seen the best match they ever had because it wasn't on TV. And so anyway, we're starting in the early '80s with this, and since I was very little at that time, I'm going to pass this over to my brother David here to get us started.
Yeah, you mentioned Ric Flair's putting over Steamboat literally, and uh, as an entertainer, as a wrestler. Uh, One thing that I remember Ric Flair saying uh, during the compilation, uh, one of the compilation DVDs that I had regarding Steamboat was Steamboat's not the best wrestler of all time because he never worked heel. The best the best wrestler of all time is me, but Steamboat is the best babyface. So, I'd have to agree with that because um, just like what we're starting out with Steamboat and the late Jay Youngblood as a tag team in the Mid Atlantic area was just um, piercing on a rock and roll express level when you hear the crowd screaming. Um, and There are several clips available to watch regarding Steamboat and Youngblood feuding with the Briscos. The NWA Mid Atlantic Briscos, no E, not to be confused with the more
Right.
modern Briscos. But Jack and Jerry, who would later become Gerald Briscoe, um, and I was telling Stephen before we started recording, I'd forgotten what a great, and by great, I mean unlikable heel Gerald or Jerry Briscoe was.
Yeah.
Uh,
Long before him
I
and Patterson were the
yeah,
Stooges in the Attitude Era.
long before the Stooge fame. Uh, he was great, and just on the mic, he was the one that held it together. I remember watching one clip of or Jack and Jerry were interrupting uh, Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood in an interview segment, and Jerry held that thing down
Yeah.
because while he is probably one of the best workers to ever do it, Steamboat, even by Steamboat standards, had not gotten comfortable on the mic yet.
Yeah.
In the early '80s, and so when you look back at some of this Steamboat and Youngblood, Briscos feud, and it's primarily mic buildup, you'll see that Steamboat looked like $1,000,000, but he still had some things to get used to from a I'm trying not to use smart terms as much.
Yeah.
I can't not say promo on this.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
from a
Yeah.
promo level, he was never Flair level or
Oh,
Stone Cold or anything like that.
promo always the weakest part of Steamboat's game, for sure.
He was more Jumpin' Jeff Farmer than anything. But
Yep.
yep. But we have to cover that one time. But anyway, we'll include that in a hodgepodge episode.
Sure. Yeah.
Anyway, I just really enjoyed going back over this Mid Atlantic stuff with Steamboat, just because it was my first exposure to him, and I just really enjoyed seeing that while, like I said, he had some things to be desired on the mic, even from Steamboat standards. The physique, the physical condition was remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
And with it being the early '80s, I don't know if supplements were, involved in that, but from a work standpoint and a move set and working in the ring, he looked, as early as that was, and that was 82, 83, he looked just as good as he did. Sorry to borrow from a next week's episode, but looked as good as he did against Savage at WrestleMania 3. And so, I mean, his work and his movement was incredible. And I think that testament to Briscoe Brothers Towing Company, that those guys were the perfect heels for them to work against, to already be sympathetic baby faces is one thing, but just to have it intensified by the swagger that was encompassing the Briscoes, well, it made it a lot of fun. And if you're a fan of the high impact, and again, sorry to steal from future next week's episode, the constant pinning combinations and the tempo of a Savage Steamboat match, you're not going to find that in Steamboat and Youngblood versus the Briscoes. It's more methodical, dare I say, old school, but it honestly is. And so I just really enjoyed, from a match standpoint, seeing them and the psychology used in that. And if I can mention too, this feud, I challenge you or beg you to go look at clips of this feud, the Briscoes versus Steamboat Youngblood, and you can see the slow turn too. That was just refreshing to see too. The slow turn of the Briscoes to make a better feud, to having true about as white meat gets, baby faces versus the Briscoes.
Yeah. Steamboat, I mean, consummate babyface for sure. Like, I don't know. I think there's few, if any, who's done it better as just a pure, unadulterated babyface, like never heel kind of thing. I try to, one thing I try to do for our audience is try to give you some modern comparisons. But honestly, like, I don't think there's a modern babyface that really holds a candle to Steamboat. Like maybe one day, and in today's day and age, like there's not, there's very few wrestlers who will stick to one side of the spectrum in babyface and heel. Like there's always going to be turning going on. Currently, I see potential in like a Javon Evans to sort of be an underdog, really athletic kind of babyface who's just natural charisma, kind of gets him over with the crowd. Although I'd already say Javon's a better promo than Steamboat was.
Yeah,
It's not a high bar to clear.
no,
But at the same time, and more on that, especially in a minute when we get on down the line. But I think back to like Jeff Hardy when he was at kind of the height of his baby faceness, maybe as a single. And then also like, this is going to sound weird, but I was thinking about Rhea Ripley right now. And one very specific thing is that Rhea's massively talented, right? But she gets like a volcanic reaction for doing almost nothing these days. All it takes is for her music to hit and for people to see her, and they just lose their minds. And that's the kind of attraction Steamboat would draw from the crowd, especially back in those days, because he was already in visibly better physical shape than most of the roster. You couldn't avoid, you could not notice that. And one thing I'll say, which again, I don't think anybody really matches the this is even, I don't even know if this phrase is going to make sense, but the technical charisma of a Steamboat. Like he almost didn't need good promo work because kind of like how Stephanie Vaquer said one time in a promo recently, wrestling is my first language. And he could draw in the crowd with, and not with his move set, not like the moves he could accomplish, but it was the way he executed that stuff and the way he was able to tell a story physically in the ring and his conditioning and stuff like that. There is a difference between telling a story with your moves and being good at moves. And I think some people kind of miss that sometimes when they're comparing and contrasting, especially modern stuff. But Steamboat was really special in that regard. And I think the best of the best that his contemporary peers were among those saw that in him, and that often fed into the partners he got to work with. Yeah. And so regarding that particular feud, I don't have a YouTube link for it. If I can find one in between recording right now and posting later, the match I was looking for was a tag team title match between him and Youngblood and the Briscos at Starrcade 83, which is famous for Ric Flair's second NWA title victory against Harley Race, and really was the jumping off point for Ric Flair as we all know him at that point, Flair for the gold. But they were on the undercard of that show, and not for nothing, one thing we had mentioned, Jack Briscoe, former NWA champion himself, and then tagging with his brother, and great job pointing out the sort of heel charisma of Jerry Briscoe as well. Like he had this sort of natural abrasiveness to the way he talked. Whereas like Tully Blanchard was really hot-headed and loud. Yeah. It was sort of a same kind of arrogance, but a little calmer. Mm-hmm. Almost, tell me if I'm off base here. It's not identical because, there's accents and all this other stuff, but almost Gunther-like in a way. Like he didn't get worked up in his promos, but the ego was just 10 times his size, like in his speaking. And that came through really well. But there are a few matches. There is a match I think I can put in the episode description as a reference point for the chemistry these four had and stuff. And it is very, very old school. I'm trying to remember if Bob Caudle was on the call for one of these matches.
Bob Caudle was. So everything that I watched that involves Steamboat and Youngblood, in preparation for this had Bob Caudle on it, which
Yeah,
I'm remiss that I
legend.
haven't mentioned Bob Caudle yet. we're still in the first match, but I was
Yeah,
really, really glad to hear him calling those matches. So.
yeah, yeah. And it's an interesting, with Steamboat's career being what it was, we're going to be spanning in this episode about 11 years. And so the different commentary teams when this matches, it's interesting to see how they play out. There's a few constants on the way through, but yeah, Caudle was a great. I would try. I even try to think, that there aren't commentators like Caudle now or Gordon Soley. And the closest thing you're going to get to him these days is like Joe Tessitore, who brings a sort of professional reverence to what he's doing. And honestly, I really, for what it's worth, modernly, I really like Joe Tessitore, especially when he gets paired with like Wade Barrett,
Yeah.
because if you have a really good and journalistically legitimized broadcast person like Joe Tessitore, who worked for ESPN, still works for ESPN during the college football season and all the other stuff, having him play the straight man and being as talented as he is as an actual broadcast journalist, bringing in a Wade Barrett makes the heel job that much more fun because they don't have to carry the load of actually telling the story. They can focus more on their own gimmick, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes for a better team,
Yeah.
in my opinion. So love that. Okay. Yeah. So Steamboat and Youngblood versus the Briscos. Any like kind of wrap up thoughts you want to share that you didn't have a chance to share about that before we move on?
Yeah, well, something I didn't think about until I heard you talking about this. Steamboat being the quintessential face, good guy, and I was trying to think um, of people that only worked face or only worked heel, and I couldn't do it except for one. And I guess we can maybe do our homework and try to figure out some others, but Robert Gibson's the only other person I'm aware of
Yeah,
that
because Ricky even didn't.
because I was going to say Ricky, but then I
Richard
remembered
Morton.
the York Foundation.
Yeah.
So
Where he still wore his Rock and Roll Express gear the whole time.
right, that yeah. So so I guess Robert Gibson's the only one. And then to respond to what you were saying about the lack of verbal skills, but the impeccable ring presence, and so the only person I could think of, and this person navigated their lack of verbal acumen the right way, I think, by incorporating into the character this silent but deadly thing. But I think about Dean Malenko,
Mm,
who is ridiculous as a performer in the
yeah.
ring, but you didn't put him on the mic much,
No.
except if you wanted to reassemble the Horsemen, of course.
Right.
But yeah, that just you're talking about those past things brought those things to mind. So figure I better mention them before I forgot them. So,
That
but as far as Steamboat goes, though, in that it was just a nice refresher with it being so early in his career. Uh, Even though like we said, the verbal thing left some things to be desired, but his move set, his working and ring psychology was just it was already there, and
yeah.
so it was just great to see.
It's funny you should mention Malenko because now that makes so much more sense to me. Why I absolutely during the Nitro era, why I loved the Malenko Jericho feud so much. Like that was
Oh
one of
yeah,
my favorite feud. I mean, listen, I'm not alone in that. Like that feud has aged supremely well. But like, I was yeah, an absolute Malenko. I mean, we won't spend a lot of time on Benoit, I'm sure. But like, him, but him, Malenko and Benoit, again, not known for their promo skills. They let their ring work do the talking, and there was a little bit more savageness, no pun intended, to those guys and what they were doing. But Steamboat, yeah, absolutely, just poetry. I remember Roddy Piper. said this too about him. Like it was like poetry in the ring with him. And we referenced this before the recording, but there's an early WWE network or WWE Productions DVD called Superstars of the 80s before each individual wrestler was getting their own documentary and stuff. And hopefully that'll be available on I don't know if it's available on any of the Vault channels yet or any of that kind of stuff, but hopefully they'll dig that up at some point. But Steamboat had a small section in there at that time because it was a predecessor to his own DVD that he got with this Legends deal and stuff. But Piper was talking about Steamboat there, and he would talk about it. And I noticed it in the matches I was watching because one of his patented moves was the arm drag. And like nobody did an arm drag like Steamboat. And just people have tried, and do their homages, but like nobody, shout out to Bret Hart. It was excellently executed, right? Like just nobody did it the way he did it. And his rhythm and his timing was so good that he would clap in the air in between arm drags and stuff, just to add a little flourish. Like he was that good. And Piper, like, he, he looked like he was on like a weed rotation or something, just sitting there, just pontificating about it. He's like, he would like clap, there, and he was sitting there mesmerized, like remembering it, like being in the ring with him and stuff and everything. But just like, and it's just one of those things, like it was again, just a small thing that is a very small missable detail that is an example of how well his craft was down, to an art form. So Steamboat and Youngblood, and Youngblood, may rest in peace. That feud, he was a year, 18 months away before Youngblood tragically passed away at a really young age. And I mean, who knows, what the future would have looked like for him too, because Youngblood was really over as well.
Yeah,
along with Steamboat. It wasn't just Steamboat by himself. But who? Yeah, that's kind of a what if you have to ask, because I think, if my timeline is adding up correctly, so Youngblood was no longer with Mid-Atlantic or Crockett or whatever when he passed, but I wasn't sure if Steamboat had left to go to the WWF yet.
They had split because, and I don't know exactly the year, but Jay Youngblood was teamed with Mark Youngblood, and I don't know if that was a Shoot brother or if it was, or what, but
or a Von Erich cousin situation.
Was a Youngblood team after for lack of a better term, the push of Steamboat. As a
gotcha.
Singer. So,
well, I'm sure
that falls in the timeline.
I mean, I was going to say, I'm sure Steamboat's look and his charisma, and like the way, I mean, granted, hindsight's 2020, but like the way people always talked about him, the Flairs and the, all those guys were like, no, he's going to be a singles guy, like, whatever. He's not the Jannetty, of the situation. Right. But not that there was a Jannetty in that tag team, but just, tragedy just was what it was. Well, let's fast forward. We're staying in the NWA. But we're skipping over the sort of golden age WWF stuff. We'll come back to that next week. And now it's time to talk about probably the most obvious entry, if you know anything about Ricky Steamboat at all, in this. We're just going to talk about the trilogy. I'll pick one of the 3 matches to put in the episode description. It'll probably be the first one. But after Steamboat leaves the WWF after WrestleMania 4, he shows up as a mystery partner, Mr. X, I think, with Eddie Gilbert, Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert, to take on Ric Flair and Barry Windham, who are no longer, because at this point, there's like ships passing in the night, like Steamboat's coming back to Crockett and Tilly and Arn have left, right? Or they're about to leave, if not.
Yeah.
But so they're gone there, which means the Horsemen are no really longer the Horsemen. I always chuckle to myself when I relive this part because honestly, like this 89 to 91 WCW NWA was really good stuff, but like there weren't really any of like the hallmark factions in that time because there was a lot of instability with some of the talent being there or leaving or whatever. So there's no more Horsemen, but there is a JTEX Corporation.
Oh yeah.
Or no. Not the J. Hold on. The JTEX Corporation comes later. It's the Yamazaki Corporation.
Oh, yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Hiro Matsuda shows up to be the sort of J.J. Dillon, who had also left to go to WWF at that point. The JTEX Corporation was Gary Hart with Funk and Muda and stuff, which happens kind of after this sort of Steamboat entry. But anyway, Steamboat is revealed to be a mystery partner. Steamboat beats Flair on TBS, which is a huge deal back then. You know, just to, again, you know, viewers, like, put yourself back in a time where there wasn't, 10 hours of mainstream wrestling programming every week. You were lucky to get one or two. And even then they were mainly like squash matches and stuff. So if you got to see a top star beat the world champion on TV, it was a really, really big deal. And Steamboat, of course, you know, one thing I really appreciated too, I wouldn't have known this at the time, but going back and seeing it now and reliving it in some of these matches, is they gave Steamboat credit, even if it wasn't, they didn't spend a lot of time on it, for his previous run. Because he didn't get that in WWF his second time around. And I think that was by design, and it's just kind of dumb. If you ask me, if you look in the grand scheme of things and see how little gaps of time there were in his absences between companies, it's kind of silly to ignore the fact that, yeah, he used to go here and he was really good when he was, by the way, you know, former US champion, former tag team champion, whatever. So yeah, in 1989, between February and May, I think it is, there's 3 world title matches between Ricky Steamboat and Ric Flair. And the first one takes place in Chicago, Chi-Town Rumble. Jim Ross and Magnum TA we referenced last episode, in the Nikita episode, are on commentary. It's a 23-minute match. We get referee cameos from Tommy Young and Theodore Teddy Long before he, you know, went to management and then general management and booking people with The Undertaker. 23 minutes. You know what? Something that really surprised me, that first of all, it was a huge show. Jim Ross at that time, you know, I like to call him by his government name at that point, because before he wore the black hat and spoke in sound bites, Jim Ross was like a legitimate broadcaster. And he was, even though it kind of became sound bites and kind of a joke to some people, he also was a very sports oriented broadcaster too, always pointing out people's sports history, or, you know, if they played football. And
Forget about it if they played college football. You could hang it up.
Yeah. And so they're in Chicago, and he's pointing out like 3 or 4 Chicago Bears that are in the crowd. He didn't get any love from the broadcast, but obviously, if you consider yourself a longtime internet wrestling fan, you can see Dave Meltzer in front row, marking out for the whole match, by the way. Like, there's no denial. Like, he's in all the way. So just him acting like a fan, honestly, is kind of nice to see. But I'm reminded of 2019, I think it was, when current AEW wrestler Tommaso Ciampa looked like he had to retire from a neck injury, and they had an NXT takeover of Johnny Gargano and Adam Cole to have a new champion, and that was in Brooklyn. And I remember watching that match because I respected Adam Cole, but like, I was a hardcore DIY fan, and I was absolutely into the whole Gargano Ciampa feud. It was one of the best things I'd seen. It was a thing that took me back to being like a passionate wrestling fan again, instead of just like keeping up with results online and stuff. And I remember that crowd hating Johnny so much. They were such a like smart crowd, and just, you know, Bullet Club this, Adam Cole that, like all this kind of stuff. And by the end of that match, Johnny had won that crowd over. It was very Steamboat-esque, like just refusing to die, great conditioning. They worked, I want to say, close to 45 minutes, I think, out of 2 out of 3 falls in that match. And I didn't catch it the first time, but that crowd in Chicago at times was chanting Steamboat sucks.
Mm.
Not as aggressively and stuff as the Brooklyn crowd was against Johnny, but it was present though. And there was the thing in the big markets, even if Flair was the heel, he was always going to have a contingent that just loved his shtick, you know?
Yeah.
And his whole shtick was, go home and be a family man. I'm gonna go nation. And you know, all the dudes really loved that. But honestly, like all the family fans sort of in the crowd were behind Steamboat in that match. So anyway, they go 23 minutes and after a ref bump, Steamboat wins the title. And this could be said, I think, of every match, and I'll shut up after I say this, if you want to, drop in on this. Their motor in that match and in all three of those matches are just insane. Because one thing Steamboat does that I've noticed, I imagine, I like to think that it starts with the Savage match, which we'll talk about next week. But he goes through these rapid successions of pinning combinations, and there is an athletic relentlessness to Steamboat that he doesn't take spots off. Like
Yeah.
he gets up, he's running at full speed. Like he never once ran the ropes forgive me, but half-assed. Like, I mean, he wasn't running like Braun Breaker 23 miles an hour or anything. He wasn't running dangerous, but he was going full effort the entire match. And like he never looked I hope there's a difference in this, but like, it's one thing to like sell and look tired, and then it's another thing to look like blown up,
Yeah.
And he never ever hit Flair either in this era looked blown up. Like I saw because the camera focused in on Flair after one of those 3 matches, and you could see him breathing heavy once the bell rang, but he didn't look like he couldn't get up and go for 5 more minutes if he needed to.
Right.
So anyway, like the conditioning on display is like it's still probably the best conditioning I've ever seen in a series of wrestling matches. But what say you?
Yeah. The trilogy, or at least the televised trilogy, because I think Flair and maybe Steamboat even said, and may have alluded to this. I'm not sure if it was during the recording or when we were talking beforehand, but it's been stated by at least one of the two that this wasn't the best match they had wasn't even televised.
Yeah.
So, but I can't think of, and I'm gonna say I can't think of a more perfect match or perfect trilogy of matches that I've ever seen from a history leading up to where they are. I mean, these guys faced each other in the late '70s. They faced
Over
each
like
other
the
in the
TV
early
or
'80s.
US titles, right?
Yeah, yeah. So they over the U.S. titles, um, and that was back when Blackjack Mulligan was in the mix too. So I mean,
Yeah.
um, I just can't think uh, those 3 matches. In the late '80s, um, they didn't have to know each other. They probably already knew what they were going to do in the ring.
Yeah.
There was no getting to know you. There's no let me understand who this person is as a worker. That um, it was just a true ready-made feud. And the trilogy, I don't know if it was always planned to be that way or not, or if they knew like, well, we've got Steamboat, we've got Flair, let's get some miles out of this.
Yeah.
Uh, they probably did, but I just I'm glad uh, they just found themselves in the company at the right time to have this trilogy because um, as far as feuds go, sure there's some that have been more violent. There's some that there's been more animosity, uh, but I don't think there's any that deserve the word classic more
Mm,
than Steamboat and Flair.
yeah.
Um, so I thought really hard about um, which of the trilogy is my favorite, and I just um, couldn't come up with one based on the match itself. I had to say, well, the Terry Funk attacking Flair set up that feud, which I really, really, really love too.
Yeah.
Uh, so I had to pick that just because of that. But uh, that's an outside element that doesn't really, you know, qualify as a part of this feud. So um, I just can't. I don't have anything bad to say about it.
Yeah.
And I know we typically um, to keep a good attitude. It's a good thing to not look for something bad to say anyway.
Yeah.
Um, but we're wrestling fans, so whether we say it or not, we're thinking it. But I can't even think of anything bad to say for this feud. So um,
Yeah. The element, so it was either one of three places or two places. Um, yeah, one of three places. It was either on like the Four Horsemen DVD, on one of Flair's DVDs, or on Steamboat's DVD. But they, obviously the trilogy gets covered, I think, in all three of those projects.
mhm.
Maybe briefly in the Horseman DVD, because the Horsemen weren't really a thing at that time because of Matsuda being there. But I was probably at my markiest mark self for Steamboat around that time. Because again, next we'll talk the WWF stuff next week, but like WrestleMania 3 was a very much welcome to wrestling fandom card for me. Steamboat, being the little Karate Kid lover that I was, Steamboat was naturally like, I was so drawn to him as a performer, and it didn't hurt that he was actually a phenomenal wrestler. And I had not even appreciated all that just yet. But that's what kept me there. Right. And the gi and everything brought me in, but once the bell rang, I stayed. And so seeing the way he got booked out of WWF made me really, really mad as a Mark fan. And honestly, even when I step out of the Markness now, I'm still kind of mad about it. The
Yeah,
more I find, the
yeah,
more I find out about it, I'm like, are you kidding me? Like
yeah.
you didn't have Savage Part 2. You didn't the Honky Tonk Man. Come on, all this stuff. And so anyway, all that to say, in one of those DVDs, they interviewed Flair and his take. And there was that era, probably early 2000s, of Flair like shooting on these different DVDs, where he
Right.
was just kind of casually talking like this, like what I have said is already
And he has a
written and
spit
it's in
cup.
stone. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And he's basically just like, we just wanted to prove we were the two best wrestlers in the business,
Hmm.
and just like stared at the camera and left it at that, knowing full well like they were counter programming to the Mega Power storyline,
Right.
to Hogan and Savage, and just being like, yeah. And I mean, like, it was such a middle finger to Hogan.
Yeah.
Like that statement was. He's like, yeah, I'll show you. And he's like, we'll show you exactly who's better. And like,
Yeah.
that was also like peak Jim Ross being like, he didn't always say anything bad about the WWF, but he always talked up the legitimacy of the NWA. And we hear the phrase "where the best wrestle," but like, but this was actually true, at this point. And things when you're looking at wrestling from like a competitive athletic sort of presentation, it was going on here. And so for Steamboat, it made me, even as a fan, just so excited, because like, it's funny for Steamboat, it's not Steamboat, for Flair to be a 16-time champion. He had to lose the belt 16 times. So I don't know where this mystique came from when I was a kid that nobody could beat him.
Yeah.
But like I couldn't believe that Ron Garvin had beat him, at one point. Like, I was in shock. And
Hmm.
then Steamboat, I think, was the next step after that. Which means, he won the belt back from Garvin. Was it Starcade 87? I think.
Yeah.
Uh, so that was Starcade 87. That was December 87 all the way to February 89. So you're almost, you're a year and a half of not losing the belt and getting your way through. And then like little Steven, like my favorite wrestler, beats the unbeatable heel champion. And I'm like, I can't believe this. Like he got screwed over losing the Intercontinental title to a joke wrestler. Like, I mean, and now he's world champion. Like, it was just like mind blowing to me and super exciting. And they go on to counter program WrestleMania 5. It doesn't steal away the viewers like the first Clash of Champions and WrestleMania 4 did, but they do 2 out of 3 falls in the Superdome, I think it is, and go 55 minutes. And Steamboat wins that match, a successful defense. And then they get to the WrestleWar 89 match in Nashville. I believe it's Nashville. It's Tennessee, where Flair gets the title back. And it's interesting. Like, again, there's just such good physical logic in their wrestling storytelling. And also, not for nothing, like Steamboat loses the title in almost the same spot where he's won multiple titles, which is, taking somebody's leg out on a like a body slam or a roll up or whatever. And it was just a cool poetic bookend to that story. And then of course, Terry Funk steps in almost immediately, which is a shame. But I will say, like, Flair turns face right at the end of that match. And that was an interesting thing with Flair too. You look at Flair's feuds with Nikita or with Luger or Dusty, or even Jimmy Garvin, like how personal and offensive, those feuds were. Even when Flair was kind of Nachin, and his Saturday night promos, there was always a layer of respect. I mean, he would give a layer of respect in putting over his opponent before the match so that if he won, he could say, yeah, I beat the best in the world, because I already told y'all he was one of the best in our sport today. But there was a different level of reverence to the respect he always gave Steamboat in the ring, which I thought was interesting. It might have been by design because they knew they were going to turn him face for the Funk feud when he was coming in, and slow building that. But even that, like, raising each other's hand, Steamboat raising his hand after the match and stuff, it was all happened very quickly at the end of that match, but it did happen. And I will say this too, just to be fair, because I will always, fight for defending Steamboat as if he really has that many attackers in the first place. But the locker room celebration promo at the end of Chi-Town Rumble is the most awkward Steamboat promo I think I've ever seen. And it was like his moment at the mountaintop. And like, I don't even know if he said 5 words. Like, he was he had to have been gassed, I'm sure, at that point. Yeah. Also, there's like shoot champagne in there being poured all over everybody and stuff. And you'll notice in sports leagues now, if they have champagnes in the locker room, everybody wears goggles. Yeah. Because that stuff gets in your eyes and it burns. Yeah. And it's so funny. You're like waiting on Steamboat to like catch his breath for a second and then speak. And like, I think it's Bob Caudle back there with him. I'm trying to remember now. It's like, okay, well, they want you to give a speech here, Ricky. What do you think after winning the NWA championship? And you can just hear, I guess the Freebirds must have been baby faces at that point, because all you can hear is Michael Hayes off camera and says, come on, give a speech, Ricky. It's like, come on, say something. And eventually you can hear it in Hayes' voice, like, cut the promo, dude.
Yeah.
Like, it's just amazing.
Something.
Yeah. Why don't you say something about being champion, Ricky?
Yeah.
Dude. Like, and it's just, oh man, it dies a slow, painful death. It's really unfortunate, but at the same time, that was never Ricky's high point. It didn't have to be. But nevertheless, that was, the 1989 trilogy. If you're ever wanting, I've criticized in the modern era, especially, and I think I've said this of different modern performers, like, I'm a good wrestler is not a good enough of a gimmick anymore. And honestly, I think I'm ready to walk that back just a smidge, just to say you have to be really special to have that sort of be your gimmick. And Steamboat was more than that, but that was the biggest piece of the pie for who he was as a performer. But there just aren't wrestlers as good as him and Flair in their primes for that to do the heavy lifting. in the modern day. I mean, there might be a few, but those guys also have really, really strong, either stronger promo skills, stronger than Steamboat's, or strong enough gimmicks. I think of like, I mean, he just retired, but AJ Styles or Gunther, maybe, you know, like those guys, their wrestling ability is the biggest piece of the pie chart in their gimmick, but they also have some bit of character outside of that as well. But yeah, okay. So yeah, I mean, we could go on and on about Steamboat and Flair for the whole rest of the episode, I'm sure. Any like final thoughts on Steamboat Flair though before we move forward?
No, I try to think of another example that was more perfect as a feud. You know, when you look at how well they fit together stylistically, but also the ideology of their characters, just the perfect, the family man versus the Nate, you know, just it was perfect storm. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and yeah, dovetailing right into the Terry Funk feud was great as well. Which actually, like, and again, these matches didn't make the list, but as a result of the fallout of that, like Funk gives a shoot, you know, well, it's not a shoot. Funk gives a pile driver to Flair on a table that doesn't break in 1989. You know, and yeah, and Funk's promo is just, Funk's got to be one of those wrestlers that is really fun to impersonate. You know, just like those voices, like, you know, I just think you're the best wrestler there ever was, Rick.
Yeah.
You know, and all this stuff, and like to be so violent with so soft spoken at the same time is really entertaining. But Steamboat wrestled Funk at the next Clash of Champions, like as a sort of revenge on Flair, and you know, Funk then moved on to Flair. But then, as a result of that, Luger came in to try to save Steamboat from the same fate that, you know, Flair had been facing from Funk. And then Luger turns heel, and then you get Steamboat and Luger, which is an underrated match at Bash 89, I think, as well, which is not on the list. But, you know, if you really want more Steamboat stuff, you could do a lot worse than that match as well, especially for Luger as well. Again, give Luger one of his best matches.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we're going to jump ahead a few years. We're skipping another WWF run, the most forgettable Steamboat run out of his career, I think. And he comes back to WCW. I gotta hit pause in the timeline here for a second, though, David, because so we're going to relive a family memory here for a second. So I remember for my 10th birthday, we got to go to Clash of Champions 17 Fall Brawl. And
Bill Kazmaier.
Yes, the one with Bill Kazmaier. If there were ever regrets I had, and now listen, it wasn't Dad's fault. We didn't know what booking was going to happen. We didn't know that Scott Steiner was going to get injured in that awesome, you know, IWGP title defense in Knoxville. I never got to see the Steiner brothers live, and I never got to see Steamboat live. And well, I never got to see him wrestle live. We went to a WCW house show at one point, and I remember he showed up with the fire breathing, like, but he didn't wrestle on that show. And I'm trying to rack my brain as to when that was. It had to be in this era, post 92, but I don't remember when it was. But we were one clash away from, it was either Macon or Savannah, I think Macon, where they did the next Clash, where Steamboat returned as Dustin Rhodes' surprise partner, where they beat Arn and Zbyszko, who beat Bill Kazmaier and Rick Steiner, that we did get to see. But nevertheless, did get to see Prime era Pillman though, and I was psyched about that. Nevertheless, yeah. So that brings us. Steamboat returns in 92. He has a run with the tag titles. With Dustin Rhodes. He also gets another one with Shane Douglas. That comes a little later, which will lead us to the last entry. But he, in the peak of the sort of Dangerous Alliance feud with a sort of hodgepodge of baby faces at the time, Sting, Barry Windham, and Dustin Rhodes, Nikita Koloff, who we talked about last week. Steamboat was a part of that babyface group as well. And Steamboat and Rick Rude this is the first time I remember it. I don't know if maybe in the earlier days if this existed, but long before WrestleMania 12 and the Iron Man match between Brett and Shawn, Rick Rude and Ricky Steamboat had a 30-minute Iron Man match at Beach Blast 1992. The same show we referenced in our Steiner Brothers episode for that Steiner's Miracle Violence connection match. This is a second 30-minute match that took place on the show. Rick Rude was the U.S. champion at the time, but it was a non-title match. And they just wrestled for 30 minutes. Again, Iron Man style. You had Jim Ross and Jesse Ventura on commentary at that time. And this was, again, because as referenced in the Steiners episode, this was early Bill Watts. He'd just gotten there. So there wasn't, it was an interesting phase because one of Steamboat's signature moves he liked to do was skin the cat, go over the top rope and pull himself back in. But then throwing over the top rope was a DQ during the Watts era. So there was always a tinge of drama in, is the match about to end by DQ, but Steamboat would pull himself back in to keep the match going, which is always a neat thing. I'll let you weigh in with anything you want to say on this match, and I'll tie us up on it.
Yeah, I was gonna comment that steamboating in Bill Watts era WCW was not. I mean, he wasn't limited, but it gave a nice layer, with this skin the cat move. Also, I'm trying to think. I don't know, because you alluded to piggyback off what you said. I don't remember off the top of my head any Iron Man matches before this, at least in WCW and NWA. And even more so than that, I was also trying to think, and I can't remember, it's not very journalistic of me, but I don't know of any meetings between Rick Rude and Ricky Steamboat before this feud.
I can only think of one.
Okay.
They did have a match at the first Royal Rumble.
Okay.
Neither of them were in the Rumble match, and they were the opening match for that show. And I think they went the time limit on that match. Yeah, but they didn't have a feud though.
Yeah, I just in thinking about this, there was no shortage of good wrestlers, but I just kind of feel in retrospect that the Rick Rude, Rick Steamboat lack of depth in the feud was kind of a missed opportunity, even though timeline wise there were so many other feuds to be had. It wasn't, ever going to be as important as the Ric Flair Ricky Steamboat feud.
Sure.
But I enjoyed their interactions so much, and ideologically they were very much opposites, like Steamboat and Flair were too. And so I just, I would have liked to have seen more, but it was very enjoyable match.
And they had, and they had, I can think of two one-on-one matches where they, really burned it down. This match being one of them, and then there was another one, and I just can't remember. I didn't do the research for this because it wasn't the match I was going for, but there was also another, I think, U.S. title match where Steamboat had a ninja in his corner, but it was really Paul Heyman in disguise, who ended up, turning on him on the match to cause him to lose. But this match was great stuff. Again, 30 minutes long. Steamboat ends up winning 4-3. So you have 7 falls in 30 minutes, but the way they built it up and telling you how the match goes isn't going to take anything away from it. Like, you absolutely should go your own way to watch it, because not only, are Rude and Steamboat both just consummate professionals, but the story they tell in those 30 minutes are fantastic too. And Jesse, surprisingly, I would say surprisingly, but Jesse does a great job of sort of narrating for the audience, like the physical chain of events happening that is weakening Rick Rude or creating, a problem for Ricky Steamboat. Like they do a spot where I think it's tied 3-3 with like 3 minutes left and Rude's locked in a sleeper hold. And he's like, well, if Steamboat, goes unconscious here, Rick can just go sit in the corner for the rest of the 3 minutes. Like he's not like, this is over, and like, just pointing out things like that. And like, even in the first minute of the match, they do a spot where Rude hurts his ribs and like, they keep calling back to that in the match. And like, it's just very intelligent commentary. And Jesse still, and Jesse was an interesting sort of heelish commentator at that time because he was really more even in that match. Like he would never say anything like nice about Steamboat, but if like Rude was doing something dumb or risky, like he would call that out too.
Right.
And because the way the match went, like I think Rude went up like 3-1 in the Iron Man match, which again sets the stage for an amazing underdog babyface comeback from Steamboat as well. Yeah. And Steamboat was probably moving his fastest in the last third of that match, the last 10 minutes, which again, another testament to conditioning and stuff. I wouldn't put Rude's conditioning on the level of Flair's, but still light years ahead of most stuff you'll see today. And Rude, man, we might have to do a Rude episode one of these days. I don't know, because he was such a good seller in his own way. Like, I think I'm trying to remember if we talked about this or if it was another discussion I had with somebody else one time. But I feel like ever since the NWO, there's been a real lack of heels who aren't afraid to look stupid, to put baby faces over. And Rude was never afraid to look stupid. Yeah. Rude or Flair. And like he, and Steamboat would take advantage of that, in the match, and it kept the crowd fired up and engaged, and stuff like that. But yeah, it's just an absolute, an absolute blast for 30 minutes straight. And I say Rude went up 3-1 in that match, but that 3-1, that one fall that Steamboat got was a DQ from Rude, who again, Bill Watts era, you couldn't come off the top rope. So Steamboat, Flair, oh gosh, all the names are running together on me right now. Rude, I think had already gone up 3-0 and then came off the top rope to do a knee drop on him just to add insult to injury, and gave up a fall just to do that. And so that might be the sequence. I don't know, but nevertheless, so a real come from behind sort of storytelling in that match. And again, fantastic conditioning from Steamboat in that match as well. And Rude and Steamboat had a couple of other matches here and there, but I think this is probably the best display altogether. Any sort of wrap up thoughts on that one?
Yeah, just like I said earlier, I would have liked to have seen more. It deserved the trilogy treatment. I feel like, but again, I just, yeah, I'd never really thought about Rude being selfless, for lack of a better term, and making the face look strong. When in all actuality, and I can't remember if it was a shoot interview I heard of maybe Road Warrior Animal, Joe Laurinaitis talking about the legit tough guys in wrestling and how Rude was one of them.
Yeah.
And, but anyway, I digress. But he was something to be said where if your gimmick is that you're powerhouse, but you're willing to bump and sell all over the place, that's really good.
Yeah, for sure. And no, Rude, absolutely one of the greats, for sure. And I think that about Steamboat too. Like he just kind of had I don't know if I'd call it bad luck, but it just seems like he got his sort of lot cast as the number 2 babyface wherever he was. And like, you weren't overtaking Hogan in the 80s. And, he has this phenomenal feud with Savage there. And then Savage moves up, but Steamboat doesn't. And he goes to WWF, has a phenomenal feud with Flair. Then Funk, Flair switches babyface, so he can't feud with him anymore. And then even now with Rude, he has a great feud with Rude, but Rude's moving to Sting. And so there's always just another more marketable babyface, even if they're not a better wrestler.
Well, everything you just named, from a working standpoint or match standpoint, he was not replaced by anybody who could hold a candle to him.
No, never.
But he was replaced by, every time on different levels, somebody who had more charisma.
Yeah.
And so it just goes back to that whole. I'm gonna have to go back and watch that promo. Michael Hayes.
Dude, give a speech, Ricky. Yeah.
Dude.
Yeah. That's in a nutshell. That's the problem. I'll send it to you once we get off. That's why people moved on from him. I think that's got to be the only reason. I think that moment probably really solidified it. I like to imagine that Flair was probably Ricky's biggest advocate at that point.
Yeah.
And he's like I could only, there's even a part of me that I have no evidence to support this whatsoever, but there's a part of me that wonders if they wanted to take the belt off him at that 2 out of 3 falls match. And Flair was like, no, let's do one more match. And let's, give him one more match, let him actually successfully defend it. And do that. But that lack of promo, cause I think about Sting when he beat Flair a year later, at the Great American Bash, and he was also locker room, champagne, all that stuff, but he made something of it. I mean, it was better than that, but I'll definitely send it to you. The Michael Hayes in the background just sends it over the top, because it's unmistakable. That's exactly who it is. It's ridiculous. All right. Well, last match, as we're wrapping up, this is going to be, I think, a pleasant surprise for a lot of you. If your wrestling history knowledge is limited, if you're only given wrestling history by 2K games or by, WWE's, version of history, but, the would-be Stone Cold Steve Austin, stunning Steve Austin, has a great feud. First of all, Steamboat, after this 92 segment here, he drifts back down into the card. He has a few TV title feuds, has a match with Regal, in Regal's early days, but as he's coming down a little bit, Steve Austin is on the come up, and they actually feuded over the TV title as well, briefly, but they meet in the middle in another U.S. title feud, in 94. And this is on, these were the dying days of the sort of pro wrestling in-ring product being number one in WCW. This was on the sunset or the eve of, Hogan's arrival, in WCW, which again, Hogan, and this is the thing, I'm going to say before I get to the match, there's a real, I don't have any beef with Hulk Hogan, but when I think about Ricky Steamboat, I always think, man, if Hogan hadn't been there, what could have been. But I still remember this. It was even in maybe it was the Monday Night Wars DVD or something. They talk about Bischoff signing Hogan to WCW. It was an episode of WCW Saturday Night where they had a ticker on the bottom of the screen, much like we have here in this episode, where it's breaking news. Hulk Hogan signs to WCW. Who would be in the ring when Hulk Hogan becomes the matter of conversation and the topic of attention, but in the middle of a Ricky Steamboat match? So they immediately stop paying attention to what Steamboat's doing in the ring, and they start talking about Hulk Hogan. Well, wouldn't you know, this match, so Bash at the Beach, 1994, that's not the match, but it's a preview to the match I do want to talk about. It's Steve Austin defending the U.S. title against Ricky Steamboat. And that is the debut of Hogan versus Flair, in WCW, which did big numbers for them, all that good stuff. Obviously, commentary talking about Hulk Hogan's arrival, right? during the match, which is something WCW did a lot, was just talk about whatever the A story narrative was during other matches, which always got on my nerves. I always hated them talking about the NWO during cruiserweight matches, on Nitro and stuff. I'm like, tell me what I'm watching right now. I want to spend time invested in this, but what is Kevin Nash going to do later? So, or whatever. Nevertheless,
I never really had a problem with that.
well played. So going back to that over the top rope rule with Steamboat, trying to save himself and everything, that becomes a major play in this match because it becomes evident that Austin is trying to get himself DQ'd to weasel out of the match. And so eventually he snakes his way into pinning Steamboat with his feet on the ropes or whatever, and bails out of the ring too. Like he really puts over Steamboat strong, kind of in his heelishness. So Clash of the Champions 28. It's August 24th, 1994 on TBS. Match goes 16 minutes because it's a TV match, but it's Steamboat versus Austin for the U.S. title. If Austin gets DQ'd, he loses the title. So they put in that stipulation. This match is famous because it's actually Steamboat's last match for 15 years. He sustains a career-ending back injury in the match. And going back and watching it, you'd never know. You'd never know from the bump. What's amazing is that Steamboat wrestles probably 7 or 8 more minutes, maybe after the injury, and still wins the title. I bring up all that Hogan stuff because this match, for all its importance, obviously they didn't know what they had with Steamboat's injury at that time, but still, you had 2 Hall of Famers in the ring burning it down, and this was pre-injuries. Steve Austin, who was a fantastic technical worker in his own right, no no knee braces, no bald head, although he did wear a vest to the ring back then, but it wasn't quite the leather skull vest. It was a little shinier, a little more Party City, but nevertheless, this match is sandwiched in between Hogan segments. Apparently Hogan gets attacked and loaded into an ambulance before the match, and which I think if my timeline is correct, we're probably going to find out it was Brother Brutai, the butcher, as the masked man, attacking him. And then we go immediately. Steamboat wins the U.S. title again, and they don't even show a replay of the finish of the match because they have to go to a medical update for Hulk Hogan, and they spend like half the match talking about, can Hulk Hogan wrestle tonight and all this other stuff. And it's just so Hogan centric, which is just such a shame because Steamboat and Austin, both guys who probably don't view Hogan in the most charitable light, are having their thunder stolen while they're really tearing it up in the ring, even Steamboat with an injury. And the match itself is really, really well done. And Steamboat and Austin were just fantastic in-ring partners. And then also, not for nothing, but Shivani and Bobby Heenan on the commentary in this particular match. So yeah, 16 minutes, great match. Any thoughts on pre-knee braces, Steve Austin, post Hollywood Blondes?
I mean, I didn't appreciate him at the time, but I probably didn't really. So was this pre-Hollywood Blondes?
Post Hollywood Blondes.
Post Hollywood Blondes. Okay. So I didn't appreciate it at the time, any of the WCW Steve Austin stuff. But looking back to Hollywood Blondes and anything that followed, I felt like he really found, a character, and the little bit of playfulness and kind of what Hall and Nash brought to the forefront of being the cool,
Yeah.
But still not being afraid to give the face their comeuppance, unlike some of the other cool heels.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but yeah, I didn't appreciate it at the time like I do now, but I really felt like he because I've heard interviews where he really um, talks up and gushes over Steamboat and who he
Hmm.
was as a worker and as an entertainer and everything. But you can tell by how people work together how much reverence they have. And if you can't, and if they don't have reverence, some people are just really good actors, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't think that the Steamboat Austin scenario fits that. I think that they had a lot of respect for each other, and they worked really well together, and it just really came through. Uh, even even though they had all the Hollywood distractions
Yeah.
match, but yeah, I just it's hard to come up with anything bad to say other than this being Steamboat's final match as a full time worker. Uh, that being sad in and of itself. Um, I'm glad it wasn't worse than it was.
Yeah.
So, uh, but yeah, I didn't know at the time. And when I was going back and watching this, I went in thinking, okay, well, this is the match. And I watched it and I was like, let me watch it again because I don't think this is the match.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
and so, but that's just a testament to what a tough guy, he is.
Well, and also a testament to his selling too, because
Yeah,
like when I realized what spot it was and I
yeah,
saw it, I was like, that doesn't look any different than his regular selling.
right.
Like to me, and so I was like, man, he's a really good seller.
Yeah,
But and so it had me double, thinking twice in my head, like, did that injury just get worse over time, or did he already know then that he had hurt himself? Because I couldn't tell because he was such a good seller.
yeah,
Um, yeah, so crazy, crazy thing there, and just one more on the sort of the Hogan thing, because Hogan always had a reputation of being loyal to his friends and making sure his friends got good deals and jobs and stuff like that. What a cruel kind of um, just consequence of all that for both Steamboat and Austin, because obviously, yeah, mutually respected workers in their own right. A month later, Steamboat would have to vacate the title, and well, not even a month later, because this was, let's see, yeah, within a month, he'd have to vacate the title
yeah,
due to injury, and he'd get fired while he's injured from Bischoff, which is a bit ironic because a year later, the same thing would happen to Steve Austin, be fired by Bischoff while he's injured. So Bischoff, I think, because I've heard his 83 weeks episodes where he's gone back and watched sort of the Monday Night War era and stuff, and I have heard him objectively say really positive things about the in-ring work of some of the best technical wrestlers WCW had to say. I don't think he was bad at finding talent, but I do think he was either unduly influenced by popular talent or bad at promoting or elevating talent.
yeah. I would
Because
say he could recognize talent, but I don't think he could treat them well.
yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's fair. I think that's
maybe
fair.
he couldn't. Maybe he could treat them well. He just chose not to.
Maybe so. But and I don't mean anything bad by what I'm about to say here, but like what a stark contrast in quality and experience after Steamboat has to leave. Austin is then sent to feuding with I should point out, a 1994 Hacksaw Jim Duggan.
Hmm.
Not a UWF Hacksaw Jim Duggan, which that could have actually been a pretty interesting
Yeah,
feud. But this was, post new generation WWF Hacksaw Jim Duggan, not the same thing. And there we are, tough guy. So, but nevertheless, those are our 4 entries for the NWA/WCW career of Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. I mean, there's a lot we didn't get into. We didn't mention his tag team feud with the Hollywood Blondes.
yeah,
We touched on Luger, and he had a match with Terry Funk, and some other things as well. But like, yeah, I think between Flair, Austin, Rude, and his work with the Briscos, I mean, all excellent stuff. And there's still, again, there's more. There's such a rich depth, even if it's just standalone matches or even like smaller feuds that he had during that time. We'll absolutely cover some of his more popularized work in the WWF/WWE next week. But any final words on the Dragon for you?
No, I just for before I really appreciated what it took to make both sides of the heel and face coin flip. Before I, decided that Ric Flair was the end all be all of everything. It was between, and this is different eras, but it was between Sting and Rick Steamboat.
Yeah.
Because you could never fault the guy's ability. You could never fault, certainly couldn't fault his physique. You couldn't fault it. He was just a great other side of the coin for what many deem as the greatest of all time. And so when you're the other side of the coin or the other side of the pillow for that, I think you just get your natural appreciation, by association. And anybody who doesn't hold Rick Steamboat in a top, I'll be generous and say, not too controversial by saying it. If anybody doesn't hold Rick Steamboat in the top 10, I submit to you that you haven't watched his work.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
you just haven't.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll absolutely say, conceding his need for improvement, throughout his career and mic work. If that's not factored in your qualifications for whatever you're trying to put a metric on, whether it's in ring work, greatest of all time, whatever, best matches. If he's not on your list, you just haven't watched his stuff. Like I can't, I would seriously cast cast a lot of skepticism on anyone who would leave him off the top 10 list. And including the so-called goats of now. And I did you say that?
Watch Meltzer mark out for him. That's
seriously. If you're one of those 7 stars in the Tokyo Dome crowds, you think Kenny Omega hung the moon, and that's no shade on Kenny in any way. Meltzer himself, the body doesn't lie.
Right.
Go watch that match. He's in
that was ironic cheering. So
no, he was in the green shirt guy seat, basically. He's right there for the whole match. You can see him just absolutely loving every minute of it. So anyways, thank you guys so much for joining us again for another Mount Rushmore matches. We'll be back next week again with more Steamboat, this time just WWF, WWE content. And we'll explore the ups and downs of that side of his career as well. And until next time, for me and my big brother David, don't forget to be a mark. Being a mark means you believe. Believing makes wrestling better. And I'll see you guys next time. Take care.